I can't remember how long ago it was, but I picked up a book called The Cosmic Conspiracy by Deyo, and I recognized the work of a first-rate mind, and I mean that with all my heart. This guy is on the cutting edge of physics, data processing, photography. I mean, you name it, he's had his fingers in it, and wherever he goes, he turns out first-rate, cutting-edge ideas and research. His name is Deyo, and he has been in and out of more things than I care to talk about right now. I don't want to cut away from his time, but I have such great respect for Deyo. He's going to be speaking about the quest for Eden tonight, the Garden of Eden, and you're going to learn something that you can't even imagine. It's going to be great. Ladies and gentlemen, Deyo.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. Well, thank you, folks, and thank you, Gary, for that build-up there. You know, I might have done a lot of those things, but it's by the good Lord's grace, and I remember that, even here, finding the Garden of Eden, well, what I call quite by accident, but the good Lord let me stumble upon it about 8 weeks ago. So before I start, let me just thank the good Lord. Will you join me? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed be thou, O Lord our God, creator of all that is. Thank you for letting us share this time together and to discover the Garden of Eden where we began. In the name of your Son, our Messiah, Yeshua ben Elohim. Amen. Toda rabah. Okay. As you can see up here, we've got a friend of mine's picture. He's now passed on, Vental Jones. He was the original, real Indiana Jones. And that was a picture taken of him in Israel on the coast of the Dead Sea, down near Kibbutz Kalia, which I visited as well. And I'm just going to hopefully make this PowerPoint thing do what we want here. Thank you. That artwork, actually, I'd just gotten back from Israel, and when I was teaching at the university down in Australia, and my students, you know, a lot of them were artists, and one of them came up with this drawing, which you saw there, because they all thought it was cool that they had an Indiana Jones professor at their university. Actually, when it was in 1989, when I went to Israel then, I stopped by Vendel's place in Arlington, Texas, and on the way through to Israel. And we were sitting at his coffee table, and he says, "Hey, you got to see this new digs I've got. I've found something incredible." And he gets out this scrap of paper, and he starts to draw pictures. And he said, "See this wadi here? That's the Wadi Hakipa. And you go down here, and you drive there, and you walk up here. And don't forget, when you climb up here, you'll fall if you don't reach up here and get a rope and then swing into the cave." Okay. All right. So we arrived there, and my friend and I were out there exploring that, and sure enough, the Wadi Hakipa means the little underground river coming down the side of the Dead Sea, the shoreline of it, which is kind of just a bunch of mud. But anyway, the Wadi Hakipa is called that because right next to it is this cave, which has a hole in the top, reminiscent of the early kippas, the rabbis used to use. They'd wrap a hair rope around there, and they'd have a little bald spot. So this little hole, I had to be there between 11 and 1 o'clock inside that cave on the day that I want to explore to wait for the sun to come down, sure as I'm telling you, shine on one particular spot in the bottom of the cave, and it would illuminate the sand and turn it blue. It's a blue glow that would occur in this particular cave. And I was to go over there and then move all the sand out of the way, take the metal plate that's buried under that to keep the marauders from finding it, and then they would open up a passage down there and go down the passage, kind of in the dark a little bit, and then down a little ledge, and something dropped on my shoulder like that. and I couldn't see it. And I thought, "Gah, don't bite me, don't bite me." And just went like this, like that, and off it went. And I heard it go down there somewhere, and I realized I'm on the edge of a very narrow precipice. It happens to be the one, because Vendel told me this earlier, that there was a big rock when they were excavating that, and it actually did roll down toward him like it did in Indiana Jones movie. As the legend goes, one of his diggers that was there with him before it became a writer and took the story to Hollywood, and it became blown out of proportion. But Hollywood denies it because they don't want to pay him any royalties. Anyway, I got down to the bottom of this thing with a very small torch, and I had to go down this ramp to where this second excavation was, to a room which had been occupied by the priests of Zadok who escaped Rome. And so you had to get down like this and crawl around and move a metal plate from the hole like that, and you could get in like that if you kneeled and crawled in. What the heck is that on my hat? It was a bat that I'd knocked down before, and he'd found me again. Stupid thing. Anyway, it was exciting because when I looked in the room with the flickering flame, it was probably a little bit bigger than this area right in here. And there were big Jordan River stones, round stones like that, stuck up into the ceiling down the walls, and they were mortared with mortar made from the Dead Sea, very salty, a lot of gypsum. And at first sight, I thought, those are diamonds in between there because they sparkled. All the mortar just sparkled. It was beautiful. And then there was a pile of black stones and a pile of white stones that the priest used in something to, balance the good and the bad or whatever. There was soot over the place where they had the altar and the candle. And Vendel eventually got about 900 pounds of red powder out of there, which was what you need in the new temple to sacrifice, to burn. You can't make it today because the plants that they originally made it with don't exist anymore. Anyway, that was Vendel and I, and he inspired me to do the Indiana Jones type stuff and to research the Bible and to learn a bit more about Hebrew. Now, why is Eden important? All right, one, to prove the Eden account in the Bible is absolutely correct down to the smallest detail. This is important even for believers. For people that are borderline believers, even more important. You need to know that what you're reading is absolutely correct. And when we find Eden today together, you will see that every clue that is in the Bible is there. You just had to read it and know where to look for it. And it's not some dust patch, and I say it was there. It is there. You can walk the ground today. You can see the walls that kept the animals in. It's an incredible place. All right. Second, to correct the concept of continental drift. Now, for those of you who don't study, geophysics or whatever, tectonic plates are what our continents sit on. And the modern wisdom in the geophysical community is that these plates are drifting apart, some toward each other, and sideways, at about 1.5 inches a year or something like that. No big deal. It takes millions of years for this to happen. Well, that's not true. The people who wrote the Genesis account stood on every continent, all connected together in Pangaea. They had to see the rivers you're going to see. It is an amazing proof that science has got it all wrong. The dating is all wrong. Now let's go. Okay, now 3. What has this got to do with dinosaurs? Because we're going to look at this. The Earth was smaller in those days. It was about 20% smaller than it is now in diameter. It expanded suddenly around the time of the flood, within about 200 years of the flood, due to a large meteor impact in the Yucatan Peninsula, the Chicxulub Meteor. That was good dinner, wasn't it? You think I jest. And the revenge of the Alka-Seltzer. Anyway, because the Earth was smaller in diameter and the continents were all together, the Earth was spinning faster. And for those of you who like to do math, go home and look at the change in centripetal force from now to when the Earth was smaller and spinning faster. Because as it was smaller, it spun faster. And that balanced the force of gravity to the point that gravity on the surface of the Earth at that time was 1/4 what it is now. This is a mystery that they could not solve with the dinosaurs. The bones of the dinosaurs could not support the weight. They would crush. They couldn't walk. This way they could. And this way those leather flying winged birds could fly. The air was more dense as well. And rivers would flow much further than they do now because the frictional forces were less. Gravity was lower. When you put all these things together, we're getting there. Put these things together, you're going to see why everyone missed where the Garden of Eden was, except for the people that lived next to it. And of course, the tribe there says, oh, well, yeah, I knew that. You'll see that in a minute. That's true, they did. All right, now 4, to find where the lost tribes of Shem actually settled. Why is that important? Part of it is more important in the next lecture tomorrow about Solomon, the Antichrist, and where they will be from and why. I'll show you where Shem and Ham and Japheth settled, and you will kind of be amazed when you see the distribution of the races of Earth in 3 bands today, color-wise, gene pool-wise, because of Ham being here, Shem being here, and Japheth being here. But this will also allow us, with Shem, to see something most extraordinary, finding out where the Mayans came from and why they had pyramids. Extraordinary stuff. All this because of the Garden of Eden. Okay, and incidentally, we locate Solomon's lost gold mines, plus the land and the ancestry and religion of the Queen of Sheba, or Shiva with a V, but that's mainly tomorrow. All right, as I said just briefly a while ago, this is also to allow you to go over and kind of make contact with your roots, to physically go to the Garden of Eden and walk in the red dirt that Adam was made from, and walk where God physically walked with him in the cool of the day in the garden. It's a beautiful place, in the wet anyway. In the dry season, it's not so good. To strengthen the faith of many and help more to believe the promise of salvation through Yeshua ben Elohim, Jesus. 8, to show the earth expanded suddenly, not gradually, suddenly in around 2200 BC. This was a catastrophic event. If you ask me what my view of world geology is, it's this. Not gradualism, not Darwinism type stuff. It is catastrophic stuff that occurred in the last 6,000 years. And I am positive of this now because of where Eden is and the descriptors that the people who gave us the description, where they had to stand and what had to be next to them. They defined, they could not have known where these rivers were unless everything was together at the time. And that was only 6,000 years ago, roughly. All right, and this will help us to identify the author or authors of the Genesis account. It wasn't Moses. And, I don't know how much people have studied this, but the early books, like Moses' book and the book of Genesis, he transcribed or redacted information from Sumerian and Egyptian documents, clay tablets. He took it from a clay tablet in the Sumerian area. We can know that because of what's called catchphrases. I'll show you the picture of it in a minute. You have this clay tablet. You write down, instead of putting page 1, then page 2, they would put, and the apple fell off the tree at the end here. And then in the continuation of the story, which is only about as big as your hand in a clay tablet, and say the apple fell off the tree. Oh, that goes to that story. Okay. It's a hard way to do it, but they were called catchphrases, catchlines. And they're there, you can see them in the English account of the Garden of Eden. In the Hebrew account, you can really see it. And I must tell you, folks, if you do not read it in Hebrew, do not translate it, you miss 30 to 40 times the information you get in English. It is just, I've encouraged so many young couples to go and study Hebrew just 3 or 4 weeks in the evening so they could read using what's called, lexicon. They could read the thing in Hebrew, and it tells you so much more about everything. There are secrets in there that, rabbis know, but you don't know. And it's just, it blows your mind. I can't begin to tell you how much is in there. Anyway, that's something we can talk about later, and I'll tell you how to get a hold of it after the lecture. You know how to learn Hebrew that quickly. All right, and it's to give us a better understanding of the way the world was settled after the flood, the migration patterns of human beings after the flood, and then after the flood, where they all came from, which is interesting too. All right, now, okay, I've told you this already about the length of the day, because it was spinning faster, the Earth, the length of the day was 19 hours instead of 24 hours. That meant this, that, okay, every day you gained 5 hours, okay, or you lost it, depending on how you look at it. It meant that in a year, you would have somewhere around 450 days, 19-hour days. And I think at the same time, although I can't prove this, that the Earth was actually slightly closer to the sun, which meant that it would have traveled a shorter distance, would have then compensated part of this 450 days. But it means that our patriarchs, the guys that were like, 800 or 900 years old, were actually about 20% less old. In other words, instead of 600, it might have been 480, still old. But our length of year differed because of the smaller diameter of the planet. And you can see, if you think, that this is going to make repercussions into the world of physics and geology. If they will accept this, it will make things a lot easier to understand in the geological record. It's interesting. Geologists on one hand, archaeologists on the other. Archaeologists say, here, this is King Solomon's digs here. That was in about, 3000 BC. That's not true, but anyway. Okay, and the geologists over say, is that right? Okay, where's that? That's in that layer. Okay, well, actually, our carbon dating says that layer is 2 million years old. Oh, okay, well, maybe we're wrong. Okay, we'll use your 3000 BC, and they circle back and forth, quoting each other. It's in the layer of such and such, therefore it's 1 million years old. Well, it's 1 million years old because the archaeological digs over here prove that it was, 1 million years old. It's circular reasoning, and it just doesn't work. Now, if you've ever made pudding on the stove, cooked it up, and as it's coming to a boil and that skim on the top of the pudding, that milk skim, and you put your spoon in, say a wooden spoon, and you push it like that skim, you see it wrinkle up. Think of the Earth's surface like this at that time. There was something that caused the Earth to wrinkle up, and those wrinkles became the Himalaya mountains. And the flat areas were the ones that didn't get pushed up. It's this soft, fragile layer of the Earth that was pushed up to make the mountains and change everything that we see today from what it was originally. Now, the direction of east before the flood was not where it is today. This is now in red. And we'll push the little button here somewhere, and you'll see it in yellow, which is where it was. Now, you wouldn't think that would make much difference, but it makes a difference in where Eden was east of. Because the Garden of Eden was in Eden. It was in the east of Eden where God dwelt. All these things piece together a great puzzle. Now, about 50 years ago, in the early 1960s, in Australia, in South Australia, a government astronomer by the name of George Dodwell discovered that he could calculate from the wobble of the Earth around its axis and that 23.5-degree tilt we're at, he could backtrack that like a top, mathematically, to where it was vertical, to when this occurred. 2345 BC, the date of the flood. That's what it turns out to be. Now, he passed on, and the government of South Australia asked a friend of mine, Barry Setterfield, another astronomer and a scientist, and a Christian fellow, to prepare Dodwell's notes for publication. Now, at the end of the lecture, I have a credit roll there, and you'll see, I don't expect you to write it down because it goes quick, but you can look in the DVD or ask me later. And you can go to their website, to the website that Barry Setterfield set up here in this country, and read the proof of this, how the Earth took, back to 2345 BC to be straight up and down from whatever caused it. Now, between Barry and George, they reasoned that it was the Chicxulub Meteor impact in the Yucatan, or in the Gulf of Mexico, that caused the tilt. Now, whether it was an immediate change or whether it took 150, 200 years is, kind of inconsequential, but it's somewhere in that period of time because of that impact, it put a shockwave through the planet. And it caused the core to change, and as a result, the Earth tilted. And by the way, the core of the Earth is changing at the very moment we speak. We have 2 magnetic north poles and 2 magnetic south poles at the moment that are wandering around inside the planet. The latest satellite information has shown that. So this is part of that catastrophic business. This may be happening again in your lifetime in the next few years, months even. We're seeing it happen. The one pole was moving a lot faster. North Pole was moving twice as fast as the South Pole about 3 years ago. And we know from the sun's northern hemisphere has a North Pole, South Pole in the northern hemisphere. And in the southern hemisphere, you have the opposite of that. So when every 22 years, or every 11 years, sorry, when the sun flips its magnetic poles, one of the hemispheres will flip first. You'll have 2 south poles on the sun for a bit, a few weeks, and then you'll have everything back to normal as this pair flips. But you go to NASA site now and you can look and see these kind of things I'm talking about. They say, well, it might happen in 1,000 years, 10,000 years. But here's the model that we've developed for it. You know, we've wasted your taxpayer money to show you how the North Poles can make maybe 2 or 3 pairs of them in our planet. Why do we need to know that now? Think about it. Okay. Look, you know, in a lot of ways, people see conspiracy there, and I say, look, if you're a NASA employee, an engineer in charge of that, if you're a USGS person, you know about a volcano, if you know these things that you think are going to happen, and you try to announce that to the public, you do the public a disservice if you just blurt it out. Because people are people, and they will panic and run and loot, and this is the big problem everybody's afraid of. How do we release it? So how do you do it? Rumor markets, unofficial sources, you know, like Stanley and other people that say, you know, look at this. And, okay, do we believe him or not? The people who think, like the wise virgins, will say, I'll look at that. That might be possible. And I will prepare for that wherever I live. Anyway, I digress. Okay, now, the Chicxulub Meteor, as it came down to the Gulf of Mexico, this is the Gulf of Mexico you see here with that yellow arrow. Now, that arrow is a force line, an impact vector to show what happened. Now, try to imagine, I didn't have time to put this all together in animations, 8 weeks. Anyway, these continents were all together. They were in Pangaea, and India was just around the right side of the screen where it's blue. Africa fit in there, and then India on the right of that. So the Chicxulub impact came through the sphere of Earth at an angle like that and put a shock wave on the spinning core of the planet, which then threw it into what is now the Indian Ocean, but at the time was solid Earth, and broke it up. Now, it took about 150 to 200 years, as close as we can estimate, and I'll show you that in a minute, to figure out how long it took and why it did what it did. Now, just watch this. You're going to see the impact. All right, the meteor goes in, will flip to the other side of the planet, and then you'll see a slight bulge and then a relax, and you'll see why it takes a little bit longer. All right, let me run this back for you. There's where it is. You can see it just swelling the Earth. And if you look at it and I roll it back and forth, you see how it bulged the Earth? Now, imagine down underneath that force arrow, there's a spinning core of the planet, and it spins the impact in an easterly direction because it hit shallow. And that's why, when you look at your maps, and you're going to see them in a minute, why India got moved from its place, shoved up into Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the mountains of the Himalayas were formed for this. This is why the Himalaya mountains have sea sediment on the top of them. They were once down there. And then when this impact occurred, it shoved them up like that, split the islands of Indonesia over that way, kicked Australia down there, make the South Pole go down that way, took Madagascar and spun it off of Africa down like that. All this happened over a period of years. In fact, one pharaoh reported, when will the earth stop groaning? Immanuel Velikovsky reported that in his book, in The Earth in Upheaval. The Chicxulub Meteor was about 6 miles in diameter, made a crater 110 miles in diameter. So it wasn't a lightweight impact. It was serious business. In fact, some people tried to say that it was the result of the extinction of the dinosaurs, but then others say no, because of iridium layer differences, but it doesn't really matter. It did happen. It did make a big hole where the Gulf of Mexico is today, and it shoved Texas and various other parts of the Gulf Coast up into the United States as well. A lot of damage. Last 2005, this entry here, 2005, was something called Chandler's Wobble, which is a small wobble in the Earth's axis in addition to the 23.5 degree tilt. This wobble stopped in 2005. It's always been there. It stopped. Reversed direction by 180 degrees. I'm telling you, something weird is happening to the planet in real time, not over millions of years. It's a catastrophic thing in formation. Again, one of those strange things that comes out of looking for the Garden of Eden.